my spreadsheet iPad's data, and let's really start playing around with Excel. Now, I'm not going to get too deep into all of the visual mechanics and such with Excel. I'm just going to talk about basic formatting. I'm going to talk about how to set functions, and then we'll talk about a really important function called VLOOKUP, and then I'm going to show you the concept of a pivot table. And to me, that's enough, right? And there's so much more to explore with Excel that I'm happy to guide anyone who wants to dive a little deeper. But I also want to be cognizant that I don't want to do too much sort of point and click muscle memory with Excel, because if you're using the Windows version, or you're using Numbers, or you're using Open Excel, it's going to look a little bit different, and some of the things I want to show you, you might not have. Main things that I would say when you're working in Excel, remember that the format doesn't have to be, right? You'll see in some of your other classes, if you're going to build things like pro formas, or you're going to build more, visual, descriptive, graphical spreadsheets, the rule I'm about to say to you right now won't always be true. But when you're using Excel to clean data or to analyze it, it's going to be the same principle of how data is structured with what we're learning in Pro. And that is that the rows are going to be the things, right? In this instance, the things are colleges, right? So each row represents a different college. The columns across are the attributes, the fields, as we would think about them in ArcPro, right? The different things we can know about those colleges. Basic structure is going to remain the same. A couple things to keep in mind: that as you start to look at your data, remember, you can resize things at will, right? Make them bigger, make them smaller by dragging these things. Your data may also look like this when you receive it, right? It may sort of look like it doesn't have those drop-down arrows. One of the nifty things I like to do when I'm working in Excel, and again, where this is may be slightly different for you if you're not using the Mac version, but it should probably be somewhat under similar sort of guiding posts. If you're to select everything, right, you can select any column you want by clicking on the number at the top. You can select any row you want by clicking, rewind. You can select any column by clicking on the letter at the top. You can select any row, any record, anything by clicking on the row, the number. You can select individual cells, right, by clicking on them. You can also select everything by coming up to the left. And sometimes this is important if you want to copy and paste and do all that stuff. But it's also one of sort of the key tricks of Excel I find so valuable. If you go to data, there's usually this thing called autofilter or filter, which is really critical, that what it will create for you, and we'll go through this sort of again on the pivot table video. It gives you this ability to really quickly click on an arrow and start to turn values on and off, right? Only look at certain values. That's really, really cool, right? I can just start looking by certain ones. I can turn all on. And I can also maybe come in and start to sort, right? That same thing, I can sort by ascending by students. I can sort by descending. So there's these really quick, clean, easy visual ways to start to structure your data that become available to you when you go to that data filter. So it's just a tip of mine that you should always put it on. Now, one caveat I want you to know when you're filtering your data is that anywhere where the filter is, right, anywhere the arrow is, that's the end of your data set. So if I started putting a new field here, right, Shay's new field, and it's going to be all about like food groups, and A&T University of the Health Sciences, here number 1, the favorite food is butter, and then you've got cheese for Anila Nakota, and then Abilene Christian is gummy snacks, and whatever. Notice that the new column I added here doesn't have an arrow. And what that means is it's not in the same filtering data set. Again, this seems like an advanced technique I'm telling you, but I'm just trying to keep you apprised of an error that's going to happen to 5 of you. If you now started sorting by other columns, notice that everything is sorting except butter, cheese, and gummy snacks are staying where they are. They're not included in the filter. And the challenge is that if you forget what you've sorted, suddenly it's Gray's Harbor you think likes butter, and Presentation likes cheese, when in actuality it was this, right? It was AT and Anila and whatnot. So I just typically would say if you're going to insert new columns while you have the filter on, do it in the confines, right? So come here and right click and say insert. Look at that, already has a field to it. Or if you're going to do it on the outside, new column, turn off the filter and redo it. Cool, so we know how to filter, we can move, we can right click on columns and insert new ones or delete them. We can do the same thing on the row, insert new records, bing bada boom. Right here on the home is where you're going to have your sort of basic organization. You play it with this how you want, right? If you want to organize columns so that things are justified at the bottom or the left or the right or the top, you do it. It's up to you. If you want to color up certain columns so they look good and you want certain things to be bolded or italicized, you do it. It doesn't matter. If you want to make text easier to read on the top, you can wrap it, right? Wrap, not wrapped. Wrapped, not wrapped. That's a good trick. If you've got multiple columns you want to merge, you do it here. If you want to visualize things with commas, do it here. Again, I don't want to spend time on each of these. I just want you to know this is a good way for you to visualize your data. The only other tip I'll have for you, right, outside of the data autofilter is notice that when I'm going down or when I'm going across and scrolling, I can lose sight of my top value, right, or my first one. And it's always important to remember that that top row, that header, whether it's in Excel, whether it's in Pro, whether it's in any database management software, that governs what each column represents, right? And sometimes it can be really helpful to never lose sight of that. And you can do that by going to View, right? You can come up to View and say, freeze top row, wherever View is. And the nice thing is that means anywhere I sort of scroll down, I'll never lose sight of that being the first row. And the other cool thing is maybe I wanted these first three, the unit ID, the post-secondary education, and the institution name to always be visible too. So I could click right here, right at the intersection of those three record rows and right below the first row, which is the header, and say freeze panes. And that'll freeze both axes. So look at that. Beautiful visual wonderness. Cool, 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 cool. That's your basic orientation to how things look. Now, one of the other things that's going to make Excel really, really cool is this idea of formulas, right? We're mostly going to be looking here. This is just sort of is data, in its sort of raw form as it came to you. But we also are going to want to manipulate the values that we have here, right? And there are a lot of formulas in Excel. And at the start of the next video, that's what I'm going to cover a bit, right? How do you actually take the values you have here and calculate new records and new values? And I'm going to teach you a couple of key functions to use in the next video.